In 1747, a man named Gideon Dudley laid claim to a patch of wilderness and built a home there, an unassuming house on land steeped in far older history. That land, thick with dense woodland and echoing silence, had once belonged to the Mohawk tribe. But whatever stories lingered in the soil were soon swallowed by the forest surrounding it, a place the settlers came to call Dark Entry. There's something about that name that feels too precise. Over time, whispers grew louder. Too many people entered that forest and simply never returned. Others who dared to live within its grasp didn't fare much better. Some broke down mentally, their minds unraveling like fabric caught on thorns. Madness seemed to seep from the trees themselves. Even now, centuries later, visitors who dare to venture near speak of strange and disturbing phenomena. Disembodied screams are said to echo from the heart of the forest, cries that seem too distant to reach, yet too close to ignore. Some report feeling sudden shoves from behind, as if unseen hands were forcing them toward some hidden fate. Others bear scratches with no clear source. And then there are the lights, soft, hovering orbs that drift between the trees with a mindless, watching stillness. One account, shared anonymously, adds another layer to the unease. The person had crept closer to the old Dudley house, its frame now choked in vines and shadows. What they heard froze them in place. Manic banging on one of the windows, rapid and unrelenting, coming from inside the house. Though the blinds were drawn on the other side, shielding whatever was within, he could see them. A set of heavy blinds, slamming forward with each blow, pushed hard into the glass as if by frantic, desperate hands. He didn't wait to find out who or what was behind them. Today, the house and surrounding land fall under the ownership of the Dark Entry Forest Association. But make no mistake, it is far from abandoned. The area is under constant watch, patrolled by both state and local authorities. Their message to trespassers is always the same. Anyone caught on the property will be arrested immediately. But perhaps that warning isn't just about protecting property. Maybe it's about keeping people from finding out what still lingers inside the trees and behind those drawn blinds. In 1932, a union was formed that drew both fascination and unease. Paul Byrne, a 42-year-old Hollywood producer with quiet power behind the scenes, married Jean Harlow, just 21, already a luminous starlet shimmering on the edge of legend. They moved into a lavish home nestled in the hills, a place meant to be their haven. But the dream was short-lived. Just 2 months into their marriage, Paul Byrne was found dead inside the house, his body discovered under suspicious and chilling circumstances. The official report? Suicide. But the truth, like the air in that house, was thick with contradiction. High-level studio executives swept into the crime scene almost immediately, tampering with evidence before police could investigate properly. Whispers bloomed behind closed doors. Rumors clung to one name: Byrne's ex-wife. One day after Paul's death, she, too, took her own life. The house did not forget. 5 years later, Jean Harlow herself would meet a tragic end, dead at just 26 from sudden renal failure. Her legacy remained, but her presence, it's said, never truly left. Years passed, and Hollywood kept moving, but the house remained. A beautiful shell with rotting silence at its core. It would eventually become the home of actress Sharon Tate, and what she saw there would haunt her forever. Tate confided in close friends that she'd seen something on the property. Someone. She described the apparition of a man, quiet and ghost-like, drifting through the grounds with an expression of sorrow and longing. She believed it was Paul Byrne. Sharon Tate, as the world would come to know, was savagely murdered in 1969 by followers of Charles Manson. The Harlow house once again bore witness to death, real, violent, and unrelenting. Even now, people drawn by morbid curiosity come to see the house, just to glimpse it from the outside, to feel the weight of history pressing through the walls, and many leave shaken. Some report shadowy figures watching them from behind the glass, vague silhouettes lingering by the windows, unmoving but unmistakably there. Others feel something more visceral, a creeping presence that seems to encircle them without sound, as though the house itself is breathing just behind their neck, cold, aware, watching. In a quiet suburban stretch of Connecticut, there stands a house built in 1916. From the outside, it could be mistaken for any ordinary residence, modest, unassuming, nestled among manicured lawns and picket fences. But beneath its wooden frame lay a darker history. From the 1930s onward, the house operated not as a home for the living, but for the dead. For decades, it functioned as a funeral parlor, its rooms holding the weight of final farewells, grieving footsteps, and unspoken sorrow. Then, in 1986, the Snedeker family from upstate New York bought the property, unaware of the role it had once played. That would change quickly. Almost as soon as they moved in, they began finding disturbing remnants of its past life. Mortuary equipment scattered among the forgotten corners, coffin handles tucked away in drawers, cold metallic instruments sealed in boxes, and in the basement, a blood drainage pit, rust-colored stains still streaking the concrete floor like shadows that had never dried. Then, the house began to move. It started with the subtle things, doors clicking open in the middle of the night, windows creaking shut as if responding to some unseen draft. But there was never any wind, never any footsteps, just the hollow sound of old hinges and shifting air, and the undeniable sense that they were not alone. Then it escalated. The family would jolt awake in the dead of night to hear screaming, not from outside, but from within the house itself. Sometimes it was distant, echoing through floorboards. Other times it came from inside closets. Childlike cries, muffled and desperate, as if something had been trapped there for far too long. The oldest son was undergoing radiation treatment at the time, already weakened and vulnerable. But what began to happen to him shook the entire family. His personality shifted almost overnight. He became withdrawn, irritable, then outright hostile. His eyes, once lively, dulled. His moods grew darker. He began writing disturbing poetry filled with necrophilic themes, verses soaked in death, obsession, and decay. And then, one night, things spiraled into horror. In a violent episode, the boy attacked his cousin, his intent deeply disturbing. He tried to rape her. The family, in shock and fear, had him arrested and taken for psychiatric evaluation. The diagnosis? Schizophrenia. He was removed from the house, and something strange happened. He improved. His mood lightened, his behavior calmed. The darkness seemed to lift, until he returned. Then it came flooding back. The family had seen enough. They moved out later that same year, leaving behind the house and whatever it was that had awakened beneath its floorboards. But some places don't forget so easily. Tucked away along the remote shores of West Bay Lake, deep in the far northeastern reaches of Wisconsin, lie the crumbling remnants of what was once a grand and elegant mansion, Summerwind. The house itself is gone now, long since swallowed by time and forest. But the memories have not faded, nor have the stories, dark, lingering whispers of inexplicable things that once unfolded within those walls. The mansion was built in 1916 by Robert P. Lamont, a man of prominence and wealth who would later serve as Secretary of Commerce under President Herbert Hoover. Summerwind was never meant to be permanent. It was a retreat, a lakeside sanctuary for Lamont and his family. Nestled beside the calm waters, the house was perfectly positioned to catch the cool, drifting breezes of northern Wisconsin. It was meant to be a place of escape, far from the suffocating demands of life in Washington, D.C. For a time, it was just that, peaceful, quiet, serene. But peace rarely lasts in a place like Summerwind. As legend has it, one night shattered that illusion completely. It began with a sound, a rattling from the basement door, something urgent, uneasy, the kind of sound that makes your stomach tighten before your brain has time to process why. Robert Lamont, believing it to be an intruder, wasted no time. Grabbing his pistol, he aimed directly at the basement door and fired 2 shots through it, sharp, deafening cracks that cut through the stillness of the home. But when he opened the door, there was no one there. No sign of forced entry, no fleeing footsteps, only silence and 2 bullet holes etched deeply into the wood. The house offered no explanation, only an unsettling truth. There had never been anyone on the other side. Only something. Those bullet holes remained in the basement door for years, visible from the kitchen, a physical reminder of an encounter Lamont could never fully explain. A ghost, some said. A warning, others believed. After Lamont's death, Summerwind passed through a handful of owners. The house stood still and silent, shifting between hands. And for a while, nothing much seemed to happen. Nothing, at least, like that night in the basement. Until the early 1970s. That's when everything changed. It was during the early 1970s that the darkest chapter in Summerwind's story began to unfold, one that nearly ended in tragedy. It was during this time that a family claimed they were nearly destroyed, not by illness or accident or madness, but by something unseen, something paranormal. Their names were Arnold Henshaw, his wife Ginger, and their 6 children, a large family looking for a fresh start, who unknowingly stepped into a house that had been waiting for them. The Summerwind mansion had stood vacant for some time. Dust had settled on the sills, paint peeled silently from its edges. But there was a feeling that it hadn't been entirely empty, that something had lingered there, watching, unseen. From the very first day they moved in, the Henshaws knew something wasn't right. The house was cold in a way that didn't match the weather. The walls groaned at night, not with age, but with something that almost sounded like breath. The children began whispering about shadows, shapes that flickered just beyond the edge of their vision, darting across the hallways, vanishing before they could scream. The entire family began to hear voices, low, muffled muttering in darkened, empty rooms, the kind of murmur that prickles the back of your neck before your ears even catch it. But whenever they stepped inside, the voices would stop, instantly, leaving behind only silence and a cold, heavy pressure in the air. And then there was her. The ghost of a woman, pale and floating, gliding silently just beyond the French doors that led off from the dining room. No footsteps, no sound, just that drifting figure moving back and forth, always just out of reach. The house itself seemed to resist them. Doors and windows, even when latched tight, would swing open again as if rejecting their presence. One window in particular refused to stay shut. No matter how many times they closed it, locked it, even braced it, it would slowly rise again, creaking upward at all hours, like it was being lifted by invisible hands. Desperate, Arnold finally took a hammer and drove a heavy nail straight through the window casing, anchoring it shut. And at last, it stopped opening. But the house didn't stop. The strange phenomena continued relentlessly. Cold drafts without cause, voices that didn't belong, doors opening by themselves, and the feeling, always, that they were not alone, that something unseen moved through the halls with them, inching closer day by day. 6 months, that's all they lasted. By then, the Henshaw family had endured more than most could bear, and when they finally moved out of Summerwind, they left with no desire to ever look back. And yet, the house remained, waiting. On a quiet, unassuming residential street in a small American town stands a house that doesn't quite belong. It's an old white-frame structure, tucked between rows of tidy homes, each glowing with porch lights and flickering televisions behind curtains. But this house, this one, is different. As dusk falls, the contrast becomes obvious. The house is cloaked in darkness. No lights shine through the windows. No sound escapes the walls. Even the crickets seem to grow quiet as you draw near. From the sidewalk, it looks sealed off from the world, windows and doors tightly shut and covered, as though the house itself is hiding something. And it is. A glance at the backyard reveals more strangeness. An outhouse, crumbling with age, still standing, as if frozen in time. It doesn't belong in this century. It feels like this house never made it to the modern world at all. as though it had been pulled from another story entirely and left here like a secret someone tried to bury. The front porch sags with decay. A weather-beaten wooden sign swings from a single rusted nail, creaking as the wind pushes it gently back and forth. But it does not welcome, it warns. This is the murder house. Behind its peeling walls is a story soaked in blood and silence, a story the town still whispers about, but never truly speaks aloud. On the night of June 10th, 1912, inside this very home, Josiah Moore, his entire family, and 2 young overnight guests were bludgeoned to death in their sleep. The killer, or killers, were never identified. The crime scene was brutal, unthinkable, and remained unsolved. More than 97 years later, the house still stands, and it still holds its secrets. People say the house is trying to speak, and some claim it already has. Over the years, countless paranormal investigators have passed through its doors, and many claim to have captured clear audio, video, and photographic proof of something still lingering within. Tours are offered, but they don't always go as planned. Several have been cut short after unsettling events. The sound of children's voices echoing through empty halls, lamps falling with no one near them, ladders tipping over, and objects flying across rooms with violent, inexplicable force. Even hardened skeptics have left the house shaken. Psychics brought in to investigate have confirmed what so many already suspect. The house is not empty. Some say they've even spoken with the spirits that dwell there, victims who never left, still trapped in the place where their lives were taken, still waiting for someone to hear their final words. And the identity of the murderer? Still hidden, still protected by the walls that witnessed it all. Because in this house, the past isn't gone. It's alive, and it's still speaking.